Howdy everybody, this is James. I was watching a video I've seen a couple times before, and I've wanted to respond to it. I think I tried responding to it once before, way back in the day, but those answers were probably crap. Um, so I'd actually like to share with you some answers I have prepared that are somewhat better. I'm not gonna claim to say that they're brilliant. Um, okay, the video is why doesn't God heal amputees? And the interlocutor, which is the term I'll use. It's used by uh, Socrates, for example, to describe the person that you're having a discussion with. The interlocutor assumes that because someone has a job requiring a degree, that makes them an educated and critically thinking individual. That's not necessarily true. I know lots of people that have degrees that are pretty much like zombies or sheep walking to the slaughter. And there are some people who have, an associate's degree or not even that, and yet they have perfectly well-reasoned arguments for what they believe and why they believe it. They've got critical thinking up the wazoo. So it's kind of assumptuous to assume that you need a college degree or a job that you had to go to college for just to have critical thinking skills, or that college is the only place you can get those critical thinking skills. Uh, the interlocutor also assumes that because physicians believe that God answers prayers, that they also believe that God cures cancer, disease, and poisoning, as if it were a pull the rabbit out of the hat magic trick. And at that point in the video, the interlocutor links you to their website, which is supposed to have more information about where the pull came from. But I went there and I was sadly disappointed because the website was basically just a link advertising the interlocutor's book, and I didn't like that. That was just kind of shady dealings, and it didn't have the information I was looking for. Um, Moving on. Uh, the next question and the title of the video, Why Won't God Heal Amputees? That's a fair question, kind of. But it doesn't get, well, I mean, it kind of muddles the issue because it says God won't as opposed to God doesn't. The interlocutor then goes on to say, we all know that amputated legs don't regenerate in response to prayer. Really? Uh, how does the interlocutor know this? I mean, yeah, it's not like there's news articles after news articles saying, "Oh, miraculous healing, amputee grows legs spontaneously." Um, uh, but uh, what about the other things that we see from Christians that are doing good in the world? Certainly, there are a lot of bad Christians out there. A lot of Christians that make us wonder, how can they call themselves Christians if this Christ guy was so good? How can these Christians be so fucked up? Um, it's a non sequitur, but uh, there are lots of Christians out there doing a lot of good work in the name of Christ. So, miraculous healing, maybe not. Uh, Good work. In addition, the interlocutor assumes that I believe that amputees are praying that God would heal them and regenerate their amputated legs. I don't know that amputees are praying for new legs. That's kind of an assumption. Lieutenant Dan, you got new legs. Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies, Forrest Gump. Anyways, onwards, onwards. And the other thing that gets really annoying with this interlocutor is that he assumes that I have to make up excuses for this discrepancy that he tries to point out. I don't think I have to make up anything for God. God can answer it for himself. I mean, if you actually read the Bible, not just picking apart little pieces, not just looking for what you want to find to make God look bad, make God look stupid. Maybe even use those critical thinking skills and analyze the Bible for some answers. I think you might find a few. And then one of the excuses was God must have a special plan for amputees. Oh my word. Okay. That's a phrase I've heard Christians use, but I'm calling bullshit on that one. I don't know what God's plans are, and the idea that God has a special plan for amputees is kind of it's a cop-out. I mean, it just makes you feel better when you hear people say it, and, with some conviction. It's like, oh, yeah, God has a special plan for amputees. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus. But, why does there have to be an answer? Can't we take some things on faith? Oh my gosh, faith! Faith! We can't have faith. We have to have answers and reasons. But here's the problem I have with that. It's great to want answers. It's great to pursue truth. But what entitles us to those answers? Everyday science teaches us that, how it's insignificant we are. The Homo sapiens, how insignificant Homo sapiens are in the grander scheme of the cosmos. And yet we presume that we deserve to have all the answers to everything? Right. Next. Why are there so many starving people in this world? Why wouldn't there be? America wastes a shit ton of food daily. A shit ton. CEOs hoard money like there's going to be a shortage of it tomorrow. Stupid CEOs. Money is just paper and numbers. Let's see. Seriously though, I don't believe that God has anything to do with that question. It seems to me it more has to do with human selfishness and a lack of willingness to be more globally conscious about the plight of others. Why should God perform a miracle if we can fix the problems ourselves? What is the point of having critical thinking skills and this radically incredible brain if we don't use it to problem solve? It kind of reminds me of that saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, feed him for life. Next. Why does God command the death of so many innocent people? Sorry, let me back up. There's these verses listing different. There's these verses, and then the interlocutor summarizes what they are saying from his perspective. But my question is, how do we know they're innocent? Because the interlocutor is assuming they're innocent. The kind of people God is supposedly killing, well, we have a workaholic, okay? Working on the Sabbath was bad. A disobedient teenager, an individual engaging in homosexuality, and a whore. well, okay, not a whore, but somebody who had sex outside of marriage, okay? Um, all these things were considered sins under the old law of which is found in the Old Testament. That is, in the Protestant Bible, that would be Genesis through Malachi. Yeah. Anyways, despite what the interlocutor says, death was not the end-all, be-all solution to these sins. In fact, if you actually bothered to read Leviticus, you would find that death was kind of like the way you handled somebody who just refused to. You weren't going to do the blood sacrifices, you weren't repentant, but you still wanted to have the loving, awesome power of God in your life. You just didn't want to follow any of the rules. Um, uh, the fact of the matter is that these people weren't innocent under the old law that the Hebrew civilization was built upon. They were, in fact, guilty. Next, why does the Bible contain so much anti-scientific nonsense? It does? Okay, by the way, using the umbrella term science, taking an example from one field of science to justify another is a non sequitur. Remember that people like Thomas Hobbes called his Leviathan, his work, The Leviathan, science. But today we call that philosophy. I really wonder what people would call Richard Dawkins' work in a century or, whatever. And you can point out stories from the Old Testament and say, and you can say, oh, these don't make sense, they're not scientifically sound, blah 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 blah. But do you have any context for that? I mean, Hebrew culture at the time, and actually it's still this way somewhat today, these stories were not meant to be scientifically sound. In the same way that Aesop's fables were not meant to be scientifically sound, but they're moral stories that bring glory to the Hebrew God. Next, why is God such a huge proponent of slavery in the Bible? Well, I'm pretty sure he isn't. In the early church, many new Christians still owned slaves. The apostles were encouraging Christians to, these new Christians to treat their slaves well and release them. And if you don't believe me, read the Bible. It's in there. Next, why do bad things happen to good people? This is assuming that there are good people. Notice the interlocutor doesn't even define what good is. Is good fried chicken the same as a good person? Last time I checked, cannibalism was frowned upon in most societies, especially our critically thinking society. Next, why didn't the miracles Jesus performed in the Bible leave behind any evidence? Beats me. Why is Christianity one of the major religions in the world today? Next, how do you explain the fact that Jesus never appeared to you? Hey, Jesus, you still in there, dude? Cool. I don't know. How do you explain that science goes back on what it says is truth about every 200 years or so? Next, why would Jesus want you to eat his body and drink his blood? This is assuming that all Christians are Catholic.